أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. So yesterday in class we um, discussed the topic of tawhid, and we said that Allah is the needless being, and that's the first attribute that we talked about, and that was proven through the cosmological argument. But the attribute that we were talking about in class yesterday is the fact that Allah is one, and that attribute is called His having tawhid, meaning His having oneness. But when it comes to oneness, um, when we're asked about this question, well, is God one? Well, we have to try to understand that from different levels. Like, you can't just say that, okay, God is one. Well, what does that mean? So then yesterday we talked about how that could mean one of four different things. We could talk about there being one and only needless being. We could talk about there being one and only khaliq, meaning a creator. And we could talk about there being one and only Rabb, which the loose translation of that is Lord. Or we could talk about there being one and only Ilah, and we didn't define what Ilah means. So for today's class, let's talk a little bit more about Rabb and what it means, and then we'll talk about Ilah and what that means. And I hope that you guys, inshallah, remember what proof we use to show how there's only one needless being. Remember how we talked about, well, if there's two, then one of them isn't going to be a god. It's going to be needy, and therefore there has to be one. And I hope you also remember the proof that we talked about for showing that there's only one creator. Now, we ended off talking about how there's about this concept about Rabb, and I gave you a couple of examples, and I said that the need that we have of Allah is, we can try to understand that by looking at the need of a light bulb to its source of electricity, or the need of a tent, like the covering of a tent, to its pole. Now I'm going to give you another example now. What I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to picture something like, for example, picture your mom in your mind right now. Okay, now get distracted for a second and think about something else. Well, what happened to that image of your mom? Right? I'm sure that when you got distracted, the image disappeared. Now you can bring it back again, but in order for it to be there, you have to have attention to it. So it wasn't just a matter of like bringing it into your mind, but you had to keep on having attention to it, and you have to keep on, putting it in your mind in order for it to stick around. So that kind of helps us to understand what it means for Allah to create us. Allah doesn't just create us and then like, okay, now we're on our own. No, He creates us and then He sustains us. He creates us and then He keeps us around. He's providing for us. In every moment by moment, we're being created and we're being sustained. And that's when we call upon Allah as the Rabb, we're recognizing the fact that He didn't just like create us and then that's it. He is keeping us, sustaining us, providing for our existence for us moment by moment. Let's take the example of the iPhone. Okay, like Steve Jobs was the CEO of Apple, and one of the things that he did during his time was that he was involved somewhat with bringing out the iPhone, and it was a revolutionary product. Steve Jobs he's dead. He passed away. But you see that the iPhone continues to live. And some people say that, okay, well, Steve Jobs is the creator of the iPhone. It's true that he was involved with bringing it about, but at this point, the iPhone is there and Steve Jobs is not there. So that type of creator is a creator with a small c, not a capital C. Let's take a builder of a building. Okay, the builder builds a building, spends like, let's say, a few months or a year or 2 years building a building. Now, once the building is completed, the builder can walk away and the building is still going to last. Even if the builder doesn't have anything to do with the building after this point, like there's somebody else who's there in charge of maintaining the building is still going to stick around. So that builder is a creator of the building, but with a small c. But Allah Ta'ala is a creator with the big C, and that means that He creates and then He's also the Rabb for what He creates. He sustains it. He's the Lord for it. He manages it. Now, Lord, Lordship or Allah being the Rabb, it's divided into two categories. And that those categories are based on the needs that we have. There's one set of needs that we have just because we're needy beings. Allah is the needless one and we're the needy ones. Okay, and these needs are called taqween, and it's in your handout. It's called taqween. In Arabic, it's ta, kaf, waw, ya, nun, taqween. And that means the needs which are existential, or those needs which are there just because of the way we are. For example, we have some natural needs, we have some emotional needs. We need air to breathe, we need food and water to survive. We need company, right? When we're young, we need parents, right? So all of these things are being provided for us, and Allah is the one who is providing them for us. So He is our Rabb, and He is the Rabb of Taqween, meaning that He's the Rabb of providing for those things which have to do with our natural needs. Now, there's an example of a story that shows how important it is to know that Allah is the one who's constantly providing us with the needs that we have in order to survive, in order to exist. There was once this man who accused Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam of doing something which was not correct. And he took his complaint to the Khalifa of that time, whose name was Mansur, and he said that Imam Sadiq, the grandson of the Prophet, he's plotting against you, and he has all these plans and plots. So the Khalifa, he summoned Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam wanted to teach this man a lesson, and he wanted to save himself as well. The man had been, accusing him unfairly, and the Imam realized that okay, well, he needs to get out of the situation, and so he also wants to teach the people who are there a lesson about that you can't play these type of dirty politics. And so what when he summoned there to the court of Mansur, he says to the man who accused him also happens to be there. So he says to him, he says that you're saying these things about me which are untrue, and the man says no, they're true. So the Imam says that okay, fine. I want you to, you can say that it's true, but I want you to first make an oath, and I want you to do the following. I want you to say that while I'm saying this statement against Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, I first declare myself needless of the power and the might of Allah, and then go ahead and say your statement. Okay, so the man says, fine. And he's like, after all, it's just some words that I'm going to say. I'll say what I have to say. I'll make my statement, and that's it. So the man says that, okay, I now declare myself as being needless of the power and help of Allah. And as soon as he says this, according to the hadith, as soon as he says this, then he falls dead, meaning that he loses his life. Now, this is an example of how, in order for us to just remain alive, we need to always have the power and the help of Allah. Okay, the second type of needs that we have is the needs when it comes to having guidelines for how we should do things. We're created in a way that we can make our own choices to a certain extent. We can choose, for example, what to say, when to say it. We can choose, what to eat, what to wear, how to live, how to how to earn money, how we should treat other people, how we should build our communities, how we should build our societies, how we should set up our governments. All these things are um, choices that we can make. Now we need help in terms of being able to make the right choices and to be able to use this ability to choose in the best way possible. How do we know what to do? That's where we need to turn to Allah to help us. And so we call upon Allah as our Rabb, and part of His being a Rabb is that He provides for us, and He's our Lord when it comes to giving us those guidelines and laws which tell us what we should do and how we should do it. So we talked about Allah being the Rabb of taqweed, meaning that He's the one who provides for our needs when it comes to our needs that we have in order to exist. And Allah is our Rabb in the sense that He provides for us those laws and guidelines we need in order to make the right choices. Now, if we look at the story of Iblis, which inshallah you'll do as a part of an exercise, what we see in the story of Iblis is that he actually was a believer. Like, he knew about Allah. He knew about Allah being the necessary being. He knew about Allah being the creator. He also knew about Allah being a Rabb. But his problem was in accepting Allah being the Rabb of Tashri, meaning of Allah being the Rabb when it comes to calling the shots and setting down those guidelines and telling us how we should make our choices. He was okay, recognizing that Allah, for example, is the creator and everything, but he didn't want to obey Allah. So this is the problem with Iblis. And so, there are people who recognize Allah and say that Allah is the one who's in charge. He's the one who, for example, makes the earth move around the sun. He's the one who makes the earth rotate, and there's night and day and all these things. But then they don't want to follow the guidelines that Allah has given us. They don't accept Him as being a Rabb when it comes to the tashri and telling us how we should make our choices. The last level of tawhid is recognizing that Allah is the one and only ilah. Ilah is very simple. Ilah is a Rabb who is obeyed. Meaning that once you know that Allah is the Rabb, the next responsibility is to obey Him. So when we obey Allah and only Allah, meaning that if we obey someone else, for example, like the Prophet and the Imams, we do so because we're obeying Allah, not independently of Allah. So once we obey Allah and only Allah, then we have recognized Him as the Ilah. If we know that Allah is the Rabb, but then we don't obey Him, then we haven't recognized Him as the Ilah. So Ilah means the Rabb who is obeyed, the entity who is worshipped. So now let's look at this statement of La ilaha illallah. What does La ilaha illallah mean? A lot of times we translate it as meaning there's no God but God. But if we look at it more carefully, then we see that Ilah means the one who is worthy of worship, or the one who is worshipped, the one who is obeyed. And so a better and more precise meaning of La ilaha illallah is there is no one who is worthy of worship, or there's no one who is worshipped like Allah. Meaning that Allah is the only one who is worthy of worship. Okay, now that meaning is like a really profound and deep meaning, because now when we say La ilaha illallah, we're basically stating and we're saying that, hey, this is what I believe in. What do you believe in? I believe that the only one who's worthy of worshipping is Allah, meaning that I'm not going to obey anyone else. I'm not going to obey anything else, right? There might be other people. There might be, for example, celebrities or movie stars or musicians or my friends or other people that I might look up to who tell me to do things that are contrary to what Allah tells me to, and I'm not going to listen to them at all, because La ilaha illallah, the only one who is worthy of worship is Allah. So just to recap, we have, when we're talking about Allah having the attribute of tawhid, there are 5 different ways of understanding this. One of them is to say that He's the only necessary being, then He's the only Khaliq. He is, sorry, 4 ways. He's the only necessary being. He is the only Khaliq. He's the only, the only creator. He's the only Rabb, the only Lord. And then the fourth one is that He's the only Ilah, the only one who's worthy of worship. Or we could say there's 5 different levels, and because we can break up Rabb into 2 different categories. Allah is the only Rabb, meaning that He's only one who is in charge of the universe and providing for our needs that we have in order to survive. And He's the only one who's in charge of setting guidelines and telling us how we should make choices. So that would be the third and fourth. And the fifth one is that He is the one and only Ilah. He is the only one who is worthy of worshipping. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين.